The next three, 7, 8, and 9, are factoring by grouping. And when I factor by grouping, I can leave it in the same order, or I might want to rearrange it. I personally like to put it in descending order, so I like to start with the one with the highest exponent. In this case, I'm going to do the negative 3u squared, and I'm going to group it with the one that I think has the most in common with it. So in this case, I would use the negative 18u, because it has both a number and a variable in common. So out of those two, I want to take out my greatest common factor. Since they're both negative, I'm going to take out negative 3u for my greatest common factor. Negative 3u squared divided by negative 3u would leave me just the plain u. And negative 18u divided by negative 3u would leave me a positive 6. So again, if I took this times this, I get my first term. This times this, I get my second term. When I do my other two terms, I want to end up with the same thing in the parentheses. So I look at it and say, okay, I want the term with the u written down first because I have the u first in my parentheses. So I have a positive uy and a positive 6y. It doesn't have a plus sign there, but I know it's positive. What do those both have in common? They both have a positive y in common that I can take out. If I take the y out of each of those, you'll notice I'm left with u plus 6. So u plus 6 now becomes my common factor. So what I'm doing basically is factoring out my greatest common factor, which is the u plus 6. And when I factor that out, it leaves me another pair of factors, the negative 3u plus y. And so my answer, u plus 6 times negative 3u plus y. Now if you wanted to check that, what you would do is FOIL it out to make sure you get the same thing you started with, because that's what factoring is you're trying to figure out, well, what times what would give me those four terms. U times negative 3u is negative 3u squared. U times a positive y is a positive uy. 6 times negative 3u is negative 18u. 6 times y is a positive 6y. Notice I got the same four terms. They're just in a different order, but we have the commutative property, so we could rearrange those. So if you wanted to check your answer, just FOIL it back out and see if I get the terms I started with. So number 8 again says to factor by grouping. Again, I always like to start with the highest exponent first, so I'm going to use the negative 9y squared. I'm going to group that with the minus 36y because I think they have the most in common. You could try it with something else. If it doesn't work, you can always start over and guess again. But I'm going to hear both of those have what in common. In this case, I can divide them both by a negative 9 and by a y. So negative 9y is my common factor. If I divide negative 9y squared by negative 9y, I'm just left with a positive y. And negative 36y divided by negative 9, positive 4, right? Negative divided by a negative makes that positive. So my goal when I do my other ones, I want the one with the y first and the 4 second. So I have a positive yv and a positive 4v. They both have a positive v in common. If I take those v's out of there, I'm left with y plus 4, which is my goal, to end up with that exact same thing in both sets of parentheses. So my common factor here is the y plus 4. If I take that out of each of my terms, my other factor is going to be the negative 9y and the plus v that were out in front of each of those factors. And so y plus 4 times negative 9y plus v going to be my answer. And I'm going to sneak this one in here, see if I can get this all written in. Again, I'm going to start with the negative 4y squared. I'm going to group that with the positive 16y since it has both the number and the variable in common. Now in this case, do I want to take out 4y or negative 4y? Really doesn't matter. Either one should be okay, so you just pick. In this case, I'm going to decide I'm going to take out the negative 4y, just for fun. Whoops, negative 4y. Better write my y down. So, negative divided by a negative is going to leave me a positive y. Positive divided by a negative is going to leave me a minus 4. So I have y minus 4 when I factor out my negative 4y. So on my other ones, I want y and first. So the negative yu and the positive 4u. So again, you look at that and say, okay, do I want to take out a positive u or a negative u? Well, I look to see what I want to have in the parentheses. I want my y to be positive, so I need to take the negative out. So I'm going to take the negative u out of there. Negative divided by a negative leaves me a positive y. Positive divided by a negative leaves me a negative 4. So my common factor in this case is the y minus 4. My other factor is going to be negative 4y minus u. Now, had you decided to start with this being positive, your answer is going to look slightly different, but it's still going to be equivalent to what we have here.